Guys, if there's one principle that out of this entire course that we would probably want you to keep in mind if you forgot tragically everything that you had learned, it would be this one simple principle, and that is it was put out originally, well, not originally, but at least to our knowledge in a formal sense. It was put out originally by a guy named Greg Koukl, who's a friend of this platform, no doubt. And in this little pamphlet, he has it's called Never Read a Bible Verse. Now, a little backdrop, why that's so important. If you know anything about real estate, which I don't, but I do know the one thing, if you know anything about real estate, is this. When you want to sell a property, there's a massive, massive rule. And that rule is, it's the most important rule, actually the three most important rules in all of real estate is location, location, location. Now, what does that mean? First off, what do we mean by real estate? Real estate, you want to sell a house, you want to sell a property, you want to sell something like that. Now, the reason that's such a big deal is because if you think about it, it just makes sense. Those three rules, location, 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 let's say that you have just a dump, right? Just a tiny little broke down shanty. But let's say that little dump is literally on the most pristine, wonderful, beautiful beach of the shores of Hawaii. People are going to be willing to pay a substantial amount for that dump, that little shanty, simply because of where it is. Now, let's say that you have a wonderful, beautiful mansion, right? Luxurious stairways and bedrooms and all of these sorts of things. But let's say that it's right in the middle of the desert. No food, no water, no health care, no hospitals, no groceries, and I don't mean just the conveniences, right? If you step outside for too long, you're probably going to die. Now, it's going to be much more difficult to sell that particular property than it would be the shanty on the beaches of Hawaii, simply because of the location, right? So those three biggest rules: location, location, location. Now, is there something like that when it comes to biblical interpretation? 100%, absolutely. This principle, right? Again, if you tragically forgot everything else, the three most important rules, right, in terms of biblical interpretation, hermeneutics, would be, again, context, context, context. So in real estate, you got location, location, location. Biblical interpretation, you've got context, context, context. And that's what Koukl's little pamphlet is about. Meaning this: if there's something difficult, some difficult passage, something in Scripture, some portion of the Bible that's difficult to understand, or is used, say, to be some sort of inflammatory, gotcha kind of verse by people that aren't really serious about wanting to know the Bible, they're just using it to try to make you look bad. The most important three rules about what does that passage mean is the context. Context, context, context. What do we mean by context? Of course, what do the verses above the passage say? What do the verses below the passage say? What is the chapter actually talking about? What is the book or the theme of the book that you've been reading? What does that talk about? For instance, the context of something in the book of Psalms is going to play heavily into what that passage means, as opposed to, say, the context in one of the epistles, right? A teaching letter, right, written by Paul, or in something like the Gospels, where it's a narrative, what's going on, what's happening there, right? Or specifically the book of Acts, which would be narrative. What is the context? You remember those three rules: context, 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 and that will solve 90 to 99% of any sort of biblical, problematic, or enigmatic, we should say, passage in terms of the Bible. You keep the context in mind, that's going to solve so much of what's going on when it comes to trying to understand a verse. All right, until next time.